Are you looking for alternative investments and tangible assets that help you build and protect your wealth while empowering your financial future? Look no further than Eckhart Enterprises. With over 37 years of experience in the industry, Eckhart Enterprises is your trusted partner in the world of alternative investments and asset management. They have a track record of success with more than 1,300 investors on board and over $700 million in capital invested in tangible assets.
Their specialty lies in offering immediate cash flow opportunities through mineral rights investments so that you don't have to wait decades to see your investments pay off. Their unique AML approach, born from decades of experience, focuses on aggregating, maturing, and liquidating assets strategically to maximize returns. Join Eckhart Enterprises. Visit EckhartEnterprises.com, spelled ECKARD enterprises.com today to begin your journey toward building and protecting your financial future.
For more information about alternative investments and asset management, visit EckhartEnterprises.com. And remember, Eckhart Enterprises is your gateway to tangible assets and lasting financial success. Contact Eckhart today.
For more information about alternative investments and asset management, visit EckhartEnterprises.com, spelled ECKARDENTERPRISES.com. And remember, Eckhart Enterprises is your gateway to tangible assets and lasting financial success. Contact Eckhart today.
Finally, a source of raw, real, and honest information on healthcare issues that matter most. Welcome to BS Free MD. From the latest medical information to how to stay sane as a doctor or a patient, no subject is taboo, no BS is allowed. Now, let's welcome your hosts, Doctors May and Tim Hindmarsh.
Hello, everybody. We're Doctors May and Tim Hindmarsh, and you're tuned into, if you haven't guessed already, BS Free MD. And I'm going to mix it up today. I thought I would read you their bio, and let's play a little guessing game to see if you can tell who's guesting on our show. This guest is an accomplished orthopedic surgeon, world record-holding athlete, author, and speaker, a graduate of the University of Texas and Texas Tech Health Science University. He completed his orthopedic surgical residency at the University of Texas. He served as chief of orthopedics at several Air Force bases and was a distinguished graduate of the U.S. Air Force Officer Training School. His athletic accolades even include national records in powerlifting and championships in Highland Games. He is a big proponent of nutritional therapy, currently opening up a health system, author of a best-selling book, hosting a top-ranked podcast in health and wellness. And without further ado, if you haven't guessed already, we are talking with
Dr. Shawn Baker, author of The Carnivore Diet. Really he kind of coined all this stuff, which is fascinating. Like he took ultra low carb diets and realized it's just meat. So he named it the Carnivore Diet. And that got him a lot of attention. He's been on Joe Rogan a couple times. He was just on Joe's show about 10 days or 2 weeks ago. And so he needs to take a step up and obviously be on BS for MD.
Wait, he missed the step and was supposed to be on BS for MD first.
Correct.
That's how it goes. Yeah. But anyway, we have a great conversation with him talking obviously about carnivore diet and how he discovered it, how it really changed how he treated his patients, how he is currently treating patients. And also we talk a little bit about some common misconceptions about carnivore diet, roadblocks by mainstream health practitioners, and his new company that will be opening right actually as this drops in the new year, Rivero Health. So without further ado, you're going to love this episode with the official carnivore diet physician, Dr. Shawn Baker.
Wow, we're back. And we are really excited. Another Thursday show where we have an amazing interview today with Shawn Baker, who we were lucky enough a few weeks ago to meet in person, the author of The Carnivore Diet. And what a story that he is going to relate to us as far as how he got into this, what he's seen medically, how he was treated by the medical industrial complex when he actually treated patients as patients instead of commodities.
Yeah,
And
he's recently been on the Joe Rogan podcast, which is an amazing episode. If I'm not telling people to ditch our podcast and go to Joe's, but you already are. So everybody that we interview gets on Joe. So he was on that, which was amazing as well. But anyway, we're excited to jump into the journey and explore the impacts of carnivore diet and his experiences and expertise and what he's learned. So welcome to the show, Shawn. Thanks for being here. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to see. Likewise, good to see you guys again. And we got to meet for the first time in Florida about a month or two ago, I think it was. But yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, I was. Like I said, the Joe Rogan podcast probably has a little bit more reach than you guys. I'm guessing maybe a touch. Yeah. But anyway, it's. I'm just as happy to be here as I was there. So
that's great. So why don't we start at the beginning? You're a carnivore. You're also holding a dog. I hope that is not part of the diet.
Not from Asia.
Oh,
he's not. Unless he acts up, then he might eventually. But no, he's actually a carnivore dog too, and he's a very happy dog. He's just he's a little mad that somebody's by our house and he doesn't like it, so he wants to let him know. And
that's his job. So tell us, okay, so you're an orthopedic surgeon. So how in the as they say in Blazing Saddles, what in the wide world of sports is going on here? How does an orthopedic surgeon become essentially a diet counselor and really, in some respects, kind of seen as the father of this carnivore movement? How did that all happen?
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, there was, I wish I could say I was trying to be altruistic and save the world, but I mean, what originally drove me there was my own personal health. I mean, I was kind of early 40s and I didn't like where I was health-wise, even though I had been an athlete. I'd been a very successful athlete and still an athlete as I am still today. But I was developing clearly what was metabolic disease. I mean, I was, had more weight than I wanted. I had sleep apnea. My blood pressure was elevated a little bit. I mean, all those things that, you kind of just, ignored. I was a busy surgeon. And then I got to a point where I couldn't ignore it anymore. And so I started just saying, okay, well, I can't do anything more from a exercise standpoint because I was already maxing that out. But let me just play with my diet. And it's not that I had a bad diet. I mean, I guess in retrospect, I kind of did. I was eating a lot of food. I was a big guy. And I'm still a big guy. I'm 270 pounds today. I was maybe 300 back then. And so I just went through all the, the usual dietary things that you were told. Eat lower fat, eat less calories, exercise more, and I managed to basically. I went from 280 to 230 in a period of about 3 months by waking up every morning at like 4 a.m., doing a couple thousand jump ropes, going to work, operating on patients or doing clinic. On my clinic days, I go to the gym over my lunch hour and work out. And then I get home and I do another couple thousand jump ropes after I put my kids to bed. And that's what I did for 3 months. And I cut my calories probably in half. And I realized that is not a sustainable thing for me to do. I can't do that over the long term. So I was quite miserable. So then I just started looking at some of the other diets that were out there. I started doing a Paleolithic diet at that time, which was popular. This is back, 12, 13 years ago. And then, I started delving into the literature on diets for myself. And I ended up on this sort of more of a ketogenic style of diet. But at the same time, and this is where it really gets interesting, as an orthopedic surgeon, we do a lot of joint replacements, as you might imagine. A lot of our patients are overweight or obese, and they generally have a worse outcome. Anytime you're operating on a patient who's got a lot of comorbidities, the outcomes tend to be compromised. And collectively, as a local orthopedic community, we kind of came together and said, hey, look, we don't want to operate on people that are above 35 BMI for a knee replacement, right? We're just going to try to avoid doing that. We're going to try to encourage these people to lose weight. And without any real instruction on how to do that, right? It was just like, okay, make your patients lose weight. I was like, okay, good luck. And we had a bariatric surgeon in town and he was swamped. He was actually a friend of mine. He was like, man, I cannot handle the traffic I already have. So, we didn't have much help there. And at the same time, I discovered this sort of low carb diet. And so I started suggesting it to my patients. And, I mean, some of them would do it. Most of them wouldn't. I mean, it was probably 20% would actually endeavor upon that. And what I found that was really interesting to me was, because I'd see them, I'd say, I'll see you back in 2 weeks to see how it's going. I'd give them the dietary advice, check in with them 2 weeks later. And, you don't expect much weight loss in 2 weeks. And indeed, you didn't see that much. But what was really striking to me is a lot of the patients would come back saying, my knee doesn't really hurt very much anymore, which I thought was really surprising because I literally had them on the OR schedule because they had end-stage arthritis. They had bone-on-bone arthritis on their x-rays. And they come back and say, my knee doesn't really hurt. So I was saying, well, that's pretty interesting. Well, if your knee doesn't hurt, then we perhaps don't need to do surgery on you. And so we ended up canceling some surgeries. And, that unfortunately doesn't sit well with a hospital because they depend upon those surgeries. And over a period of time, gradually over probably about a period of about a year of seeing this, I started to, talk to my hospital administration. I was ahead of that orthopedic group. I had 12 surgeons working underneath me or providers working underneath me. And, I kept getting this sort of stonewall. Hey, it's nice that you're thinking about that, but we don't want to give you any time because what I was asking for was like half a day a week just to do lifestyle counseling. And they were like, no, we're not really interested in that. That's really not what you're here for. Just shut up and keep operating on people, basically is what I was told. And that didn't sit well with me because I'm kind of a guy that, I can get a little stubborn at times. And I was like, no, I'm going to do it anyway. So I did it anyway. I was just like, okay, I told my nurse, hey, block my schedule, bring these patients in. I'm going to have talks with them. And, it ended up being, me going through a legal battle with the hospital, which I lost my job there, got a complaint at the state. The state basically said, hey, look, you've got this complaint with you from the state. We want to investigate that. Our schedule is, you're going to have to wait about a year and a half before we can do it. And oh, by the way, it's going to cost you probably $250,000. They're trying to give me an option. They said, do that. Or if you surrender your license right now, you can go get independently evaluated at this place called CPEP in Denver, which is, completely independent of where I was. And I said, all things considered, I'd rather do that than go fight with this stupid hospital again because I thought they were unethical. So I went there and got evaluated. And this is in 2017, as I recall. I just, in fact, it was just prior to me going on Joe Rogan the last time. And, they did their evaluation. They sent the report to me like 2 months later, said, hey, there's really nothing wrong with the way you practice medicine. Go back to work. Right. So then I got that. I gave it, I had to turn that information over to the state licensing. They said, oh, okay, that's fine. Reapply for your license. So I did that. And that took, 6-8 months to reapply for my license. So all said and done, from the time I got done between, when I had this deal with the hospital, getting fired from the hospital or losing my privileges rather, to getting my license back, took almost 4 years. By that time, as a surgeon, I hadn't touched anybody in 4 years. I was like, I was already disgusted. So I was already, I'd already been, a couple of years into the nutrition and diet, and we'd already started another company. And so at that point I was like, you know what, you can have that stuff. I don't really care about it anymore. So that's what got me, like you said, into this sort of weird space that I'm in now where I'm a proponent. Now the carnivore diet, again, this was also just an evolution, my own personal interest. I thought low carb diets in general were pretty good for health, but I'd stumbled across this crazy group of people, and I thought they were completely nuts. They called themselves the zeroing in on health group or whatever, and they were all eating just meat. And I thought, this is the craziest bunch of wacko people you'd ever think, because that's what everybody thinks, right? I was no different. But I mean, I was sort of vicariously watching them, and it's kind of almost just like studying these people and saying, are these totally nutty? And I was seeing some things that were objectively curious, to me. And I was like, wait a minute, this can't be right. And then after following them for, almost a year, I decided, well, let me just try it for a little while and see what the hell happens. I'm already low carb. I don't really believe in the, fat's going to kill you type of thing. So I was already, 80% of the way there anyway. So I did it, incrementally. I did it for a day, then I did it for 2 days, and I did it for 3 days a week. And then finally at the end of 2016, I did it for a full month. And I was just blown away about how good I felt. I was like, wow, this is interesting. I feel really good. Things that I didn't even know were problematic have gone away. This is the thing, you kind of accept a certain level of just, existence and assume it's just normal for your age, normal for that time, your phase of your life. And what I found out was that those things aren't normal. And I mean, I had for instance, my digestion was, I think, reasonable. I didn't have Crohn's disease or IBD or anything like that, or IBS. But you'd eat and you bloated a little bit or something like that. That went away. It was just like, I don't even know I'm having digestion anymore. And it's just, you think about it. It's like when I breathe, I don't consciously have to think about my breathing. It just happens. There's no pain or discomfort associated with, same with my heart beating, or, presumably, if I walk around, my knees don't hurt, right? I mean, that's considered normal, but we kind of justify, well, your guts hurt a little bit. Oh, you're bloated, you're a little gassy, it's uncomfortable. That's normal. That's normal digestion, we're told. And I just don't think it is. But the other thing that happened, I'd had tendonitis in my right quadricep. So I remember I had quadricep tendonitis for at least a decade. I remember I was squatting heavy one time. I was doing a 500-pound squat, and I think I kind of like partially tore my quadriceps tendon a little bit, and it always hurt me. If I'd sit in a car for too long, it was painful. Going on an airplane was painful. I mean, there's days I couldn't work out because of that. And I was just resigned. That's part of being older. And that went away completely. And it's never come back. And it's like that went away in about 2 months. And I was like, this is really, really curious, particularly as an orthopedic surgeon. I thought that was really, really interesting because I had tried, and everything that you're supposed to do for tendonitis, believe me, I had tried because it was annoying and it just went away from me. And then beyond that, I said I was an athlete, and I was, at this time, well, it's kind of funny, I'm doing this again. At that time, I was doing this sort of competitive indoor rowing on a Concept 2 machine. They have world championships. They have thousands, like literally tens of thousands of people compete in this every year. And I had managed to break an American record, or a couple of American records in that, just before going carnivore. I was 49 at the time, and I'd broken the 40 plus world records, which I thought was pretty cool because I was at the top of the age class. So when I turned 50, I was carnivore, and I literally just shattered everything I'd already done, even as an older guy. And so I broke a bunch of world records, a bunch of American records, and just saw a remarkable improvement in my overall capacity as an athlete. I healed better. I recovered faster. My training was better. I mean, despite the fact I was eating basically no carbohydrates, which you're always told, oh, you got to have carbs to perform. And I just didn't see any of that. So to me, it was just a really interesting thing. And then so at that time, I had relatively small following on Twitter. I think I had like maybe 3,000 people following me on Twitter at that point. And I had announced to the world, back in 2016, hey, I'm going to try this crazy all meat thing for a month. What am I going to die of? Obviously I'm going to die. Of course, I'm either going to have scurvy, or, my heart's going to clog up, or my colon's going to fall out from lack of fiber. Something's going to happen, right? Obviously I'm not going to survive. And of course, end of 30 days, I survive. I was actually quite surprised, and I kept, at the end of 30 days, I said, well, that was fun. Let me go back to a more regular, normal diet, right? Mixed omnivorous, low carb diet. And I immediately felt worse. I mean, within 24 hours, I was like, man, my back hurts. My guts are bloated. I don't like this. So immediately within 24 hours, I said, nope, I'm going back on the meat. And I've basically done that now this is my 8th year doing that. So I've been there. And then, about a year into it is when like Rogan got a hold of it, and he invited me onto his show, and then, everything, then the shit hit the fan. It was just like, okay, what the hell is this? And then I started, every vegan on the planet suddenly decided I was the Antichrist or something like that. It was just like, oh my God, this guy's telling people to eat meat. He's an awful, awful, awful person. So that is kind of the genesis of where I am today. You're kind of the
perfect anti-hero though for vegans, because you're this big, tall, burly, super cut, strong guy, like, it's
athlete,
kind of like the Skeletor to their, their yeah,
well, they're not He-Man,
I love, well, yeah, you could be He-Man too. Like, it's just, it really, it is almost, it's so hilarious because it is true. And then you see a lot of these other people, like, I used to play hockey with a guy, great guy, nice guy, decent hockey player, and he was vegan, and it's just like, like, there's just no, they're so skinny. And
now there are vegan athletes, I know,
well,
that,
but vegan bodybuilders, but
they're few and far between,
and they poop a lot.
Yeah, yeah, you obviously the fiber, you're going to go to the bathroom a lot. And it's not that you could not be an athlete. It's not that you could not be a bodybuilder on vegan. It's just harder to do so. And honestly, to me, it just flies in the face of the whole premise of veganism anyway. If you're a vegan, you're supposed to have the least impact possible. But if you're eating a lot as a bodybuilder, as an athlete, you are by definition causing more animal death. I mean, I had this argument with these wacko vegans a while ago, and I said, look, I get it. I eat more than the average person, and that's a choice I make. And I know that ultimately, an extra cow every 5 years is going to die because of that. I'm fine with that. I mean, I'm okay with that, but they kind of do that. But, I mean, I've seen this, and it's interesting. I know a number of actually fairly accomplished vegans, vegan athletes that have gone from vegan to either more meat-based or fully carnivorous, and their performance catapults above what they're at. So it's almost like they're handicapped athletes, and you want to applaud them for persevering like you would someone that was maybe a Paralympian or something like that. You've given yourself a handicap, and yet you're overcoming the odds, and that's down to grit and willpower. But you would be so much better if you would just friggin' eat a damn steak once in a while. I mean, it's just anyway. But there's no doubt there are some. But I mean, they're the minority. And quite honestly, if you look, there's a stereotype for reasons in many cases. Most vegans tend to be on the smaller side. They tend to struggle with muscle mass. They tend to struggle with, osteopenia. They tend to struggle with a number of things, unless they are very, very disciplined about it and very, very conscientious. And even a lot of times that doesn't work. And they have to be lucky in some cases too, because some people have these genetic predispositions to not perhaps convert, beta carotene to retinol. And there's a whole host of things that have to line up. Your microbiome has to be dialed in, correctly. Whereas with carnivore, it's like the idiot's guide to good nutrition. I mean, you don't have to think. It's just like, here, just eat a bunch of steak and you're good.
I have a couple questions. One is just kind of going way back to when you were talking about people that losing the weight, lost significant amount of weight, their knee pain got better, they had bone-on-bone osteoarthritis. So I'm thinking some of our listeners or people are going to be going, how is that possible? If you have bone-on-bone osteoarthritis, lose weight, then it stops, you're not even a surgical candidate anymore. Is it just because the pressure's not there putting the joints together, or is there some other changes that went on?
Yeah, well, I mean, they were doing it in absence of significant weight loss. I mean, this is within 2 weeks. I mean, they hadn't lost maybe a pound or two. I mean, it's not a weight loss difference that was causing the pain relief. And so what I was taught as an orthopedic surgeon was just what you're taught, wear and tear. It's, mechanical trauma. The more weight you put across it, there's this mechanical advantage. Every pound on your gut is like 6 pounds at the knee when you're running, and on and on and on. And, while those numbers are no doubt accurate, I think what really is happening is, as much as there is a mechanical effect to the way our joints work, there is very much a biological effect there, and there is an inflammatory effect. And so, I mean, there was a couple studies out there and there's more all the time, but there was one particular study that I think the University of Alabama did, looking at comparing low carb diets to low fat diets in osteoarthritic knee pain. They found clearly low carb diets had an advantage. They are much better. There is this cell type called the fibroblast-like synovial So synovial cells are the cells that make the synovial fluid. That's the fluid that lubricates your joints, right? And in the presence of high insulin, those cells will sort of secrete all these inflammatory cytokines, and these cytokines will contribute to our frank joint damage, but also just that completely inflammatory milieu that's in the knee. And so when you reduce that, it's not that the bone on bone changes significantly. It's just the perception of pain that changes. And so, I mean, there are a lot of people walking around bone on bone in their knees that don't have that much pain, or don't have. I mean, I've looked at a lot of X-rays over the years. I've looked at thousands, and some people will have, I mean, minimal radiographic findings, and they'll be in the severe, horrible pain. And other people, it's like, man, what happened? You let a dog chew on the end of your knee? And they have no pain or minimal pain. So there is definitely a biological component to this, and I think that's what you're addressing with nutrition. That's why it happens so quickly. So it's just as much biology. We used to think that we would divide arthritis into plain vanilla osteoarthritis, the old age wear and tear arthritis, from the so-called inflammatory arthropathies, the things like rheumatoid arthritis or psoriatic arthritis. And, we would recognize that these inflammatory diseases have a biological, but we ignored that in osteoarthritis. But it turns out that even plain old osteoarthritis is very much, and I like to call this, the orthopedic manifestation of metabolic disease. I think we see a lot of that, whether it's tendinopathy, rotator cuff injuries, peripheral neuropathy, or compression neuropathy like carpal tunnel syndrome. Those things all get better, or they tend to, in the absence of metabolic disease. So if you can fix your diet, fix your health, all those orthopedic things, many of them just go away completely or significantly get
It's
better.
fascinating because it harkens back to medical school. And I remember them saying, for whatever reason, when you lose cartilage and you have bone on bone, you get pain. We don't really know where the pain comes from because there's no pain receptors in cartilage or in your, the knee capsule has pain receptors, but no one had a really good explanation why this arthritis is painful. And it very well may be that it's just inflammatory mediators that, release substance P or whatever it is and increase your pain. And it increases pain everywhere because you're in this inflammatory state. And I'm coming to believe that, carbs are just essentially a pro-inflammatory agent, especially these highly refined carbohydrates that we eat, that just, it just makes everything bad. It makes your mood bad. It makes your, mental clarity bad. It just makes everything, you're fighting life with one hand tied behind your back or worse.
Yeah, back when I was a quote unquote good doctor and doing the right things per the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons and the AMA, people would come to my office and they would say, doc, when I eat gluten or when I eat bread, my knee hurts. And I said, well, I kind of chuckled to myself. You're a wacko. You're crazy. No, it doesn't. You're insane. I mean, this is 15, 20 years ago. And now I've come to realize that, yes, not only were they not wrong, but it happens all the time. And it's very much a significant part of the disease pathway or the expression of the disease. And you mentioned, the cartilage versus, the periosteum has some pain receptors, but the entire joint capsule, it's all this soft tissue around it, the menisci, the ligaments, the joint member, joint capsule, all of it has, it's still affected by arthritis. So when you go in there and replace a knee, and I've done, hundreds of knee replacements, you go in there, you cut the end of the femur off, you cut the end of the tibia off, you shave down the bottom surface of the patella, and you resurface this with this beautiful, nice, polyethylene, and cobalt chromium alloy, and it's nice and shiny. And yes, you've removed that surface, but guess what? The soft tissues are still there. And that's why if you look into the literature, if you look at the orthopedic literature and you look at, knee replacement outcomes, it's all like, oh my God, 95% great result, right? That's what we sort of tell ourselves as orthopedic surgeons. But then you go look at the pain literature, the people that see, the people that don't do well. It turns out that something like 40% of the knee replacement patients still have significant pain, even years after the surgery. And why is that? Because you haven't addressed the actual root cause of the problem. You put a Band-Aid on there. You put a very expensive, highly sophisticated Band-Aid on there, but you haven't taken the arthritis away. It's still there. It's just not, you just don't have those joint surfaces anymore. And yes, they get better, but I mean, you're not fixing the arthritis. And I used to pat myself on the back when I would do somebody's knee and they get a good result, or they said, hey, my knee feels better. And they come back 2 years later for their other knee. I thought, oh yeah, they like me. They got a good result. I kind of pat myself on the back, but really what I was doing, I was letting them down. I should have let them, if I'd have known better, maybe we could have avoided that second knee replacement, but I had no clue. I didn't know. I mean, change your diet, lifestyle, maybe avoid this need for another joint replacement.
So what you're saying is,
anyway, yeah, it's very fascinating.
What you're saying is, if I had seen you sooner, I wouldn't have gotten my second hip replacement this last January. Yeah, no, I know. No,
I mean, there's no guarantee, but I mean, if I were like, if I went to the doc, I mean, it's kind of amazing. I mean, I don't know, maybe orthopedic surgeons are hard up for patients these days, but I had a friend of mine. I do jujitsu with him. He's like 40, 42, right? And he was telling me, hey, the doc says that I need a knee replacement. And I said, what? I said, show me your x-rays. And he shows me the x-rays and they're not even bad at all. I'm like, are you serious? He really told you need a knee replacement? And I was like, and he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu, very active guy, super fit. I'm like, you're going to lose a lot of that by doing this. I seriously would not do that. If I were you, I would consider at least changing your diet. So he changed his diet around. He went carnivore plus apples. So I'm doing carnivore plus apples. And, he's fine. He's totally fine now, and he's just like, but I mean, it is something that if you, like I said, if you are, at an age where, well, I mean, really any age, to be honest, but I would seriously, because it's not an emergency typically, unless your knees are like crooked and fall, like super unstable. But if you've got a knee that you can walk on that just hurts, man, change your diet, do it for 6 months before you consider undergoing these major, sort of life-changing surgeries, which by the way, they can't be undone. There's no going back. Once you get a knee replacement, it's it. There's no reset button on that. And all you got left is revision surgeries. And if that fails, eventually a fusion. If that fails, eventually an amputation. Now, again, fortunately, that's very few people end up down that route. But if you could avoid surgery, I say that as a surgeon, if you can avoid any surgery at all possibility, you should do so. I think so.
But I think this is like so amazing to hear, because, usually it's take the anti-inflammatories, buy yourself some time, do the, I don't know. I don't think the Synvisc is like in vogue anymore, but, was doing the steroid shots now.
Yeah, that's all gone too.
Yeah, that's gone too. Yeah. But no emphasis. I mean, because probably, like you said, back then, and even still, many orthopedic surgeons don't know about the impact that the diet plays in that inflammatory process.
Well, part of the problem, and you mentioned orthopedics is probably one of the worst places to attempt dietary advice. I mean, because, one, we know nothing about, I mean, we literally learned zero about diet. I've got, tons of orthopedic textbooks and review books. None of them ever mention going on a low carb diet or changing your diet for any condition. It's just not even considered. The only just minor consideration will say if your patient is malnourished, like their albumin is through the floor and they're like, dead, you need to nourish them before you operate on them. But beyond that, there's no consideration for that. And really, the practice is not set up for that. I mean, my practice as an orthopedic surgeon was to see literally 50 patients every day, plus whatever the PA wanted me to see. So I'm just like, sometimes I'm seeing patients for 3 minutes. I'm in there checking the wound. Oh, the wound looks good. Great. Pat them on the back. Get out of here. That was a turnover that was expected of you as a surgeon. So how are you going to spend half an hour even talking to people about their nutrition? You just don't have, just to bring the topic up takes time. I mean, I was handing flyers out here, check this out, by the way, go watch these videos, read this book. That's all I could do as a surgeon until I said, look, I need more time for this. And that's where, it all turned to shit for me. But, I mean, it's one of those things that, had they intervened early, like at the beginning of the disease, before you start handing out the anti-inflammatories, before you start the cortisone injections and the Synvisc injections and the arthroscopies, and then eventually the replacements, that's usually about a 10-year window for most people, maybe even 15, 20 years. If you start early, you're going to probably prevent 3/4 of your probably eventual knee replacements. Again, that's not
Wow.
Helpful for a hospital that depends upon, that income. I mean, they want you to do surgery. I mean, they bend over backwards. The more surgeries you do, the more overtime they give, and the more money you get paid. I mean, it's just like, here you go. Keep doing what you're doing. Pat on the back. I mean, when I was literally the busiest surgeon in the entire hospital. I did more surgeries than the general surgeons, every other orthopedic surgeon, in that entire hospital. And they loved it. I mean, they were putting me on billboards. They put me in magazines. They put me on the radio. Advertised the hell out of me because I was their golden boy. And then when I decided, hey, wait a minute, let's talk about nutrition. Let's talk about lifestyle. Then it was all of a sudden I was excommunicated. I was just this pariah suddenly. It was amazing to see how quickly that turned, from the golden goose to, wait a minute, this guy's talking crazy talk. He's talking about not, there's so much profit.
We know all about it personally. So tell us, what was the actual complaint? Like, who complained to the board of medical examiners? It's like,
So basically what happened was I was selected for a random peer review, right? As they saw I was continuing in my insistence on this lifestyle thing, they said, oh, Dr. Baker, by the way, you've been selected for random peer review. I said, okay, that's interesting. What prompted that? Oh, no reason. And so it's kind of funny. They said, we selected 12 cases and you're going to be reviewed by, and I said, who's reviewing? I said, this guy. And I said, well, he's my direct financial competitor. Isn't there some sort of problem with that? Because our group was basically taking money from their group and he was their friend. They were friends with the hospital CEO. It was kind of a weird situation. So they did this random peer review and said, oh, we found some deficiencies in your care. And I said, well, let me see them. No, we can't let you do that. I said, what? You won't even let me see them? They said, no, no, you can't see that. And I said, I'm not even allowed to see what I'm being accused of. Right. And so they ended up going to, they have this, I can't remember called the meeting, some credentialing meeting or something like that. And they said, well, we've decided that your care is substandard and therefore you are suspended. And then I ended up getting a lawyer and we basically had to subpoena to get the records transferred. And I got all the records and it's too long to go, it's complex, but basically it was garbage. I mean, I looked at this stuff and I said, you accused me of doing reverse shoulder replacements. You said are wrong because it's not FDA approved. And yet it's a standard of care already. I mean, this is one of those situations where you have an off-label usage for a procedure, and the patient outcomes were great. The patients did great, but it was like, oh, you did something that's off-label. And I was like, yeah, but I go to shoulder society meetings and this is what they're doing as standard of care now. This is, so anyway, it was comical in a way that they did it. They were saying, look at these x-rays where the patient got worse. I said, you know what? You guys mistransposed the date. You were looking at a post-op, a pre-op, and you thought it was a post-op. And they made all these errors in there. And I said, this is ridiculous. This is supposed to be this fair hearing trial. And the guy they chose to sit on this by law or by bylaw or whatever it was not supposed to be a competitor. And I said, you chose this guy as my competitor. I said, no, he just retired from that group. And I'm like, he's getting frigging residuals from that group. So anyway, they upheld the ruling. And then the state got then they went to the state, and the state said, hey, we've got this thing that says you have all these issues against your practice. What do you want to do about it? And they said, you can obviously contest it at the state level. I said, when can I do that? And they said, well, it was like a year and a half later. And I'm like, I'm supposed to sit here for a year and a half. And they said, or you can go, like I said, you can go get an independent evaluation. But to do that, you have to surrender your license temporarily. And I said, okay, let me do that. And that's what I did. And then I basically, like I said, went up there, it wasn't the kangaroo court. It was like regular dudes saying, hey, look, they pulled all my records, looked at them, said, you're fine, go back to work. And like I said, by that time it took 4 years. And I was like,
your story in these systems is a daily theme that we hear.
Yeah, I mean, people don't know peer review. Peer review is very, very ridiculous. I mean, you have no rights. You can't even see who accuses you. You can't even see the evidence they're using to accuse you with. It's just like, somebody said something bad about you. We're not going to tell you what it is.
No,
what do you know?
It is hospital systems, and especially big groups that own multiple hospitals literally can act like the Stalin regime, which is show me the man and I'll show you the crime. You can be like exactly. It is the stories we have heard from coast to coast. We thought that, stuff that we had dealt with and our colleagues had dealt with was unique. And then we started the podcast, we start talking to people all over the world, and it's like, nope, it's the same everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, you got to pull the toe of the party line. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's like, you look at I practice in one of the most litigious states in the country, in one of the most litigious fields in the country, and I've got zero malpractice, complaints, right? I mean, there was one case that was settled that was not my fault, but other than that, it's perfectly clean. It's like, it's not like I'm out there killing people. I had a really good practice. I had a good record. I had great patient satisfaction. But like you said, the hospitals decided they don't like what I'm doing anymore.
Right.
I want
I'm trying to help people.
Yeah, I want to rewind just for a sec so people understand just exactly how expensive this is to a hospital system. These procedures drop down thousands and thousands of dollars per procedure to the bottom line of the hospital. I was in a conversation with a hospital system I used to work at, and I used to, I was a director, and we had a gym. We were going to get into the gym business. But the gym business isn't very good, and you only make so much money. And essentially, the CEO told us we drop to the bottom line the same amount of money per bypass surgery as the gym makes in an entire year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot. We're talking, millions and millions and millions and tens of millions of dollars. I was paid a good salary, but I mean, I was probably paid 2 or 3% of what I was bringing to the hospital in physical therapy and imaging and physical therapy and hospitalization and lab fees and blah, 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 and facility fees and OR fees. So, I mean, it is kind of crazy that, it's all about, and these hospitals, I mean, they have tremendous expenses. And if, all of a sudden, if a big orthopedic player says, I'm not going to do that's because when I was in the military moonlighting, I had hospitals line begging us to come work for them because they didn't have an orthopedist. And they were like, it saves us so much money than having to, export it out like these smaller town hospitals. They're like, gosh, we'll pay you a ridiculous amount. I mean, at that time it was like, cause I was making Air Force salary, which is like minimum wage, back for a surgeon. And I was like, okay. And I go to the friggin' hospital and work a weekend and make more than I made in a month, as a military surgeon. And so it is crazy. There's so much money involved. And that's the thing that most people, that's what jaded me. When I went to this, I was very naive and very, I guess I was just sort of like, I thought you do the right thing and, that's a good thing that happens. But then you come to realize how much it is just about money. It really, really is. And, the patients are kind of a secondary consideration to that. Sometimes if they get help, if they get healthy, that's a side effect of it, but it's not the main driver. No,
it's a veneer. It's a business model with a healthcare veneer. That's really what it is. I don't think it's anything other than that. So are you seeing, now let's get into happy times.
I want to know who was when you were starting off on Carnivore, because we've interviewed Anthony Chafee and I know you know who he is, the plant-free MD, plants are trying to kill you. Did you know about him at the time? I mean, you guys you're both, yeah.
Anthony? No, Anthony, I don't know. I know Anthony says he did something back 20 years ago or something like that and then stopped or something like that. I don't know. I know who was in the carnivore space when I started, 7 years ago. And I've been very much present on social media continuously ever since then. There's been a number of people that now popped up and said, "Oh, by the way, I've been doing it for 50 years," or something. Whether the veracity of that's hard to confirm, but I mean, there are people that I generally know that have been doing this 15, 20 years. And I've been in communication with them ever since I've been doing this. There's some new names that have come into the place, that have popped up and not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but it's one of those things that, when I was doing it, there was only one other physician that I was aware of that actually was doing it at the time. And I feel bad. I'm blanking on his name. He's a guy at a Rio Ranch in New Mexico, older guy, retired guy, family practice guy. And he was very, just kind of mild mannered, meek guy. I mean, he, unfortunately this is a message that needs someone that is a loudmouth like me. I mean, quite honestly, you got to have, because you're going against the grain and you're going to get your ass handed to you if you don't fight back pretty hard. And so, to my knowledge, there weren't a lot of physicians that were actively doing this, even 5 years ago. There's a couple now, and there's more every day now. Now as more people have seen the clear results that so many people are getting, if you just open your eyes, you cannot help but notice there's a lot of people getting a lot healthier by doing this diet. Now, whether you want to use it as a lifestyle excuse and wear a t-shirt that says I'm Carnivore Carl and look at me type of thing, I don't really care about that. I really look at it as a therapeutic intervention, and I don't look at it as plants are trying to kill us or anything like Anthony represents kind of the extreme end of it. Even though I think I can realistically say I popularized the carnivore diet. It was called zero carb prior to that. There's a few people that mentioned carnivore, but I legitimately came up with the name carnivore diet back in really 2017 when I started writing 2018 when I started writing my book. It was published in 2019. And it has grown exponentially and continues to grow. And I mean, my experience on Rogan this time was so different than the first time. The first time I went on there back in 2017, he goes, "You only eat meat? What the fuck is wrong with you?" I mean, he looked at me like I was like a wacko, right? They're trying to like, "Oh yeah, I'm crazy." And this time I go in there and he's like, gushing about how good it's been to everybody he knows. And so he's obviously seen that as well. And that's obviously, the guy has humongous reach. And so that's obviously been very good for the entire, I guess, concept of it. And so now we're in a, it's kind of a fight. And fortunately, one of the things I had hoped to accomplish by going on that show, first time I didn't realize the impact it was going to be, because I'd kind of heard of Joe Rogan. I didn't really know much. Now I realize that he's one of the most powerful media figures on the planet. So when I went on there, I had a couple things I wanted to. One, I want to talk about our company, Rivero, which I managed to get that in there. But I also wanted to talk about the woeful lack of research that's been done in this regard, because I think it does need to be researched. I'm not the person out here that's trying to sell snake oil. I'm saying, look, there's something going on legitimately. We need to know what's going on. Let's do some research. And everybody's been reluctant to fund it because, it's a fad diet, or we don't believe it. We think you're going to have a heart, all the sort of the preconceived biases about it, which I think are unfounded or founded in really weak science. And so now, fortunately, I've had a number of groups that are reaching out to me to try to fund some of this stuff. So we're hopefully this year we'll have a number of studies underway outside of what the one at Harvard did was, it was a start. It wasn't really an intervention. It was just a survey. So it's kind of like they're limited by survivorship bias, self-report status, and all that stuff. So now we're going to get some more, hard research on this, which is really, really
it is. And I just think of so many places that you could research this, where you look at, is there a certain subtype? Is there people with a genetic presupposition that do better and others do worse? Are there people that are more tolerant to carbs? It could really open a huge can of what's going on metabolically that causes all these metabolic diseases. We're really at kind of the blunt instrument stage. We know that people that eat low carb diets do really well. Now, is it meat itself? Because there's a lot of people saying, no, meat is the perfect food. It's like mother's milk. You don't need anything else. So is it the meat, or is it the low carb, or is it a little bit of both, or is it how much fat you're eating, or is it, there's so many questions, and really none of them have been answered yet. There seems to be a tremendous number of, John the Baptist out there screaming like somehow they know that this is the savior. And I love what Henry Kissinger said, which is if somebody knows everything about or if somebody is 100% confident in a situation, they either know everything about it or nothing.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. And that, that's something I've said. I know with 100% certainty I'm wrong about something, probably lots of things. I just don't, I don't know yet, but anyway, it's something like, some of the early things, I think particularly things like inflammatory bowel disease. My gosh, we've had such good results with that. And I cannot tell you how many people that probably needlessly go through, colectomies and small intestinal resections when they probably didn't need to. If you would have fixed them with diet, particularly if you started early, my gosh, we see so many kids, teenage kids getting diagnosed with Crohn's disease. And it's, the discussion is, well, let's just put you on a biologic, and then that's going to fail in about 3 years. And we'll put you on the next biologic, and then that'll fail in the next one. And then probably within 10 years, you'll have some segment of your, intestines resected. And that's what they're told, and that's what they expect. And so, where I've got people that, they literally people that have been in that situation, they've been on 3 or 4 biologics, they've failed them all, and they go on carnivore, and all of a sudden they're completely symptom-free, off all medications. And they're like, damn, I wish I'd have known this 10, 15, 20 years earlier. It would have saved me tremendous heartburn. And then the poor people that have undergone, colectomies, now they're crapping into an ileostomy bag for the rest of their life. So we've got I think one of the studies we've got lined up, we've got a case series currently underway that Harvard's going to do. That's case series. That's fine. That lays the framework. That'll be followed by hopefully an interventional trial where we'll take, inflammatory bowel patients, put them on carnivore. And hopefully what we're looking at doing is an RCT between a vegan diet and a carnivore diet,
awesome.
and run them both and see what happens. And I think that would be a really fun, that would be a really informative and really fun study to do, because they're both whole food diets. The question is, the problem with that is if you get randomized into the vegan side.
There's the problem.
I think they should have a UFC cage match after they're done the diet, and then that will be the Uber winner. Will actually be. You could sell tickets.
So of course, I always have this discussion with a lot of people, and the number one question, at least I get, is like, how sustainable is this? Isn't there going to be vitamin deficiencies or issues with, I won't even talk about the fiber so much as phytonutrients and micronutrients that you're getting in certain.
Well, let's just talk about phytonutrients. So, phytonutrients, we consider those unique to plants, but it's interesting. There's a researcher named Stefan Van Vliet. He is formerly of Duke. He's now at Utah State, and he has done all this metabolomic profiling on different foods. And he's looked at beef, and beef has something like between 50 and 70,000 individual unique nutrients within beef. Many of them, thousands of them, are actually phytonutrients. And they tend to be more bioavailable in beef than they are in many of the plants. And you have to remember, a cow's palate and diversity on what it can graze upon is wider than what we can do. I can't eat grass. I can't eat half the forage that a cow can eat. And so they're getting all these additional phytonutrients that I couldn't even consume, even if I wanted to eat a plant-based diet. So we are getting phytonutrients from things like beef, and particularly depending how diversely grazed these animals are, even more so. The other I mean, we hear, like, what about scurvy? What about vitamin C? I mean, those types of things. I mean, in all practicality, no one, and I mean no one, is getting scurvy on a carnivore diet. Now, we've got literally tens upon tens of thousands, even maybe hundreds of thousands of people have done it now for periods ranging from a few months to many, many years, even many decades, and no one's developed scurvy. And we've known that literally since literally the 1800s, when scurvy was first being described, I mean, at least, I mean, in this, in understanding what it was. I mean, they've got examples of people doing these polar expeditions, circumpolar navigation stuff, where if, as long as they had access to fresh food, fruits, vegetables, or meat, they did not get scurvy. And in fact, fresh meat was considered curative for scurvy back then. If you just got, if you're on a long boat voyage and you started to develop signs of scurvy, as long as they fed you fresh meat, and what I mean by fresh is just not like put in a can or dried out. I mean, just like you get in the supermarket, as long as it's still got some moisture to it, I guess it cured scurvy. So these vitamin, the interesting thing is, I mean, we have this sort of thing called the RDA, the recommended daily allowances, which says you need, X amount of zinc and X amount of, potassium and X amount of, whatever, all the different, things that are on there. And what we know is that, like, for instance, I'll use zinc as an example. The RDA for zinc, I can't remember what it is. I think maybe I can't remember what the number is, but if you eat 1,000 milligrams or 1 gram of phytic acid, which would be some beans, right? Whatever. Beans are, high in phytic acid, grains, then your zinc requirement is literally double. And if you eat 2,000 milligrams or 2 grams of these phytic acid, your zinc requirement becomes tripled. And so the RDA is dependent upon the baseline diet, So it's like, well, what is the whole, and so the RDA is based upon the standard American diet, which is, 40% grains, 55, 60% carbohydrate. As that's where you're supposed to get the nutrition from. But when you don't have all that, it changes dramatically what our requirements are. It changes how well things are absorbed. You look at, for instance, calcium, for instance. On a plant-heavy diet, a lot of calcium is not absorbed, because of, right. It's attached to phytic acid, it's attached to oxalate, it's attached to fiber itself. So when you don't have that in there, you're gonna, particularly on a higher protein version, you're gonna absorb more calcium, and so that happens. Magnesium, the same thing. Magnesium, same as calcium, it doesn't get absorbed well in a more of a plant-based diet. And then on a high carb diet, your magnesium requirement goes up, because magnesium acts as a cofactor for all kinds of carbohydrate metabolism, metabolic processes. So your requirements go down, and 2, your absorption goes up. So it's like, well, wait a minute, maybe I don't need quite the RDA of magnesium. I can get away with a little less. And so there's all kinds of examples for that. And honestly, I just don't think we know for sure. What I know is that I am not seeing with any regularity at all anybody developing any major significant vitamin deficiencies. And having done this for years and years and years and years, I mean, occasionally you'll pick up like a low serum level or something, like folate is often a little bit low. But again, you're not seeing any any signs of clinical deficiency. What would low folate look like? Well, megaloblastic anemia, sores in the mouth, things like that. Obviously with, pregnant women, neural tube defects. We're not seeing any of that stuff. And it goes back to, it was interesting. There was a study done in the Inuit in Greenland back in the 1920s, where they were looking at serum vitamin D levels, because they were learning that, if you don't have much sunlight, your vitamin D is going to be low. And indeed, their levels were very low, both of them. There was 2 groups in 2 regions in Greenland. One group had, a serum vitamin D level of very low, like below 20, what is it, nanograms per deciliter, or whatever the vitamin D is measured in. Both groups were the same exact low serum vitamin D levels. One group developed rickets and one did not. Okay, why were they developing rickets with this group with low serum and this group not? Well, the group that developed rickets, it had been exposed to the Western diet. So they were eating, their seal meat and all the other stuff, but they were also eating flour and sugar and grains. For some reason, that diet made the vitamin D that they had in their serum not as effective. So it's not even the serum level that's ultimately what we can hang our hat on. So, I mean, you might have to say, well, we would have to look at the cellular level. How would we would maybe assess it with a biopsy? Of course, biopsying people is not very convenient. That's why we draw blood, right?
My goodness.
No, that's
fascinating.
No, it's really crazy. The other thing that I hear all the time, probably like as soon as I say, we've interviewed carnivores and that kind of is, well, what's their cholesterol? And I'm like, and then my head explodes but I'm usually very polite, and I say, yeah, well, LDL tends to go up, but so does everything else. So whatever.
I mean, that is probably quite honestly, that's probably the biggest hurdle out there is, what about heart disease? What about cholesterol? And I will tell you, and again, I've seen labs on, thousands of people now. Some people it does go up for sure. Mine didn't really change much. I'm one of the, my cholesterol is slightly elevated regardless of diet. It's just that's what it is. It is what it is. And there's other people where it goes down. And for those people where it goes up in, many of them, there's this whole, I'm sure you guys are familiar with this lean mass hyperresponder phenotype that's just been, the initial results have been published. And so it seems that, that's a response to basically a low carb, maybe low liver glycogen state where it's just an energy requirement. So the liver is basically trafficking more energy in the blood in the form of free fatty acids, triglycerides, and concomitantly the lipoproteins. And because of that, the concern is, well, they're obviously going to develop heart disease. And I mean, anecdotally, I see people all the time where their LDL cholesterol is, they should have had a heart attack 6 years ago. I mean, it's like 500, and the doctors
Exactly.
in a heart attack when they walk in there. They get a CAC scan at 0. And I'm like, well, how long has this been like this? Oh, I don't know, 5 years, 6 years. So we've got this sort of, the dogmatic paradigm, the science says that heart disease or atherosclerotic heart disease is unequivocally related to how high the cholesterol is and for how long it's high for, right? It's just area under the curve, right? No questions asked. There's nothing else besides that. And there's another group of people who are saying, wait a minute, maybe it's dependent upon other variables, which I tend to fall in that camp. I think it appears to be a dependent variable. If you're like the average American who is, the average American is pre-diabetic, by the way. The average A1C is like 5.8 or something like that. That's average, right?
Yeah.
The average American is already pre-diabetic and how many pounds overweight, right? If that's you and your LDL cholesterol is up, yeah, you're probably at higher risk for heart disease. And it probably would do you some good to lower those risk factors. Now, if you want to just take a pill and take a PCSK9 inhibitor and bottom it out as low as possible, and who knows what the side effects might be with that, that's fine. Or you might decide, hey, I'll lose weight and I'll fix my metabolism. I think that's a better route, quite honestly, but that's debatable. But I mean, if you have somebody that is metabolically becoming either healthy or becoming healthier, and their LDL cholesterol rises up for that, I don't know what the net effect of that is. I mean, it could be that the net effect is lower risk, lower overall cardiovascular risk. I think that is the case in many people, but you don't know for sure. I think one way to help sort that out is with imaging, at least serial imaging, because some people say, well, the CAC score is late results. You wouldn't wait for people to break their bones before you told them to fix their osteopenia, right? So there's that argument out there. So I mean, I'm not a person. There are some carnivore doctors and low carb people who say LDL cholesterol doesn't matter. Ignore it. If you're on low carb, you're fine. I'm not that guy. I think it's a red flag. I think it's something you should investigate. I think there's more information you need to know. And if you decide that I'm okay with having elevated LDL cholesterol, and I am personally, because I know a lot about myself. I know what my VO2 max is. I know what my blood pressure is. I know what my glycemic control is. I know what my inflammation is. I know what my body composition. All that. I have all that information. I've had my heart scan. I am pretty confident, or at least I'm fairly, I wouldn't say confident. I am fine with where I'm at right now. And maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? I mean, I'm going to die of something at some point anyway. But I mean, hopefully later rather than sooner. But so I tell those people, if you're okay with that, and most of them are, quite honestly, because I've taken care of so many people. They've had this MS where they've been bedridden, multiple sclerosis where they've been bedridden and their life's horrible, or intractable depression, or IBS, or IBD where they've got, they're crapping themselves 20 times a day. Going from that to normal life, I got a job, I got a family, I just had a kid, that type of stuff. And I'm saying, would you be willing to switch back to another type of diet? And they're like, hell no, I am so much better. I will take that risk for increased heart disease if it comes. Most of them don't believe it's there. And, empirically, it's hard to comprehend that I am better in every single metric possible, including every lab metric, including every imaging metric, including my blood pressure, except my LDL is higher. Yeah. And that's what's killing me. It strains, it strains credulity to think that in some ways, just from an empiric, basic common sense way. But we have 50 years of industry funded research, quite honestly, that says you got to get it down. You got to get it down. And then now they've got people telling you that your LDL cholesterol needs to be below 60, below 40, below 20 in some cases. It's just like, that's never been seen before in human beings. I mean, that number has never existed. We'll say, well, you've got this beta lipoproteinemia, weird genetic disease that people have low cholesterol and they don't die early. But I mean, it's like you're conflating a genetic disease to some environmentally induced condition. That's not the same thing. So it's like, anyway,
but that's exactly right. Like it's pretty clear that people that have the familial hypercholesterolemia, have premature heart disease. But that doesn't mean that it's just cholesterol that kills you, increases your risk for heart disease. It means that they have this disease that increases their risk for heart disease. And one of the aspects of it is their cholesterol is super high and their blood type is gravy. Like it's you don't know, and you don't know what you don't know. And it comes back to this, to the Kissinger quote. Anyone who's really 100% confident about something either knows everything about it or nothing about it, and no one knows everything about anything. So we always have to assume that we're at least partially wrong, but we're on a path to try and be more correct. And and
then you always have to follow the money trail of who's telling you this. I mean, if it's pharma selling more drugs, pick your favorite anti lipid lowering agent, but also going back to where, the history of how did the cardiologists, start talking about cholesterol being bad for heart disease, and sort of who funded that? Wasn't that back in like the 50s?
It started in Vietnam. It started in the Korean War. That's where it started.
It's interesting with the advent of the statins, which came in, I think, at the end of the 1980s, if I'm not mistaken. And prior to that, they were really, and there's a guy named Malcolm Kendrick. He wrote a book called The Clot Thickens, which is quite a good book. You should look at it. And prior to that, they were really entertaining this idea that cardiovascular disease was really a phenomenon of, kind of more of a thromboembolic type of phenomenon. You had this thrombotic phenomenon that first occurs, and then the clot, and then the atheromas sort of occurred afterwards. And they were investigating that. That was a drug company's push. And then I can't remember who it was. Maybe Merck came up with the first statin. And then I think Pfizer said, wait a minute, they're going to make money on this. Let's get in there. So they all got in bed, on this sort of statin thing. And it's just where the drug companies decided they wanted to go with it. And then of course those became, $100 billion, medications. And what I think is going to happen is, I think what we're seeing is, the optimist would say, well, science will prevail, and we're finally going to get research, and it's going to disprove some of this lipid hypothesis, and people are going to do the right thing. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think what we're going to see is when the pharmaceutical companies figure out how they can make more money on a different mechanism, that's what they will start to emphasize. And I think you're starting to see that already with these GLP-1 receptor agonists, because what you're seeing, what are you hearing? Well, yeah, they're good for weight loss, but guess what? They lower cardiovascular risk. And they're going to start to say, maybe we should focus here. But as long as we can make $1,000 a month on this stuff, right, is what they're charging people for this stuff right now. So I think the lipid hypothesis will die when there's enough money in some other hypothesis.
Right. They have a drug. They have a drug for Peyronie's disease that changes the bend in your penis from 30 degrees to 25, and one of the side effects is penile rupture. Where literally I read the prescribing information because we did a show on this, and it says if you're getting an erection and you hear or feel a popping or cracking sound in your penis. Yes, exactly. It's the Hillary's cankles and seriously, and you sit there and they're so good at selling stuff. They can sell this shit and consume tens of millions of dollars of advertising on, ESPN when you're watching college football for a disease that, I know some guys have painful erections, but the treatment is you can't have sex for 6 weeks, and you have to let some guy inject your penis with this, and then you have to go home and you have to do stretching and massaging techniques. And I was like, I was doing that for free in high school. Like, I mean, come on, it's insanity.
Okay. Back to
That's funny. Yeah. Yeah. It's I mean, like I said, I mean, speak back to the cholesterol thing, they're coming up with vaccines to literally wipe out the PCSK9 gene so that you no longer express cholesterol, basically, I mean, effectively. And you think about if that's irreversible, my God, can you imagine? Let's say you no longer can produce adequate cholesterol, or I mean, whatever you want to call adequate, but I mean, you are forever destined to have super low cholesterol.
For your hormones and your neurotransmitters.
What does that even mean?
Your brain,
your immune system. We know our immune system is cholesterol is part of our immune system, or the lipoproteins are. So if we affect that permanently, who's going to volunteer for that? I don't know. I mean, I guess you get somebody. Well, you take some poor person and offer them $10,000 here, be a guinea pig for this trial.
Was any indication of who would volunteer for
crazy.
that? That's your answer. There you go. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, we've got some people that are maybe they got more sense or less sense.
So what are you doing? What are you doing now? Tell us about the new venture and how people may want to get involved if they want to actually get treated for diseases and potentially cured and become their own best doctor and change their diet. All these amazing things.
Yeah, well, sure. Yeah. So, like I said, I'm out here bitching about how crappy the healthcare system is. I've been doing it for years, but it's like, well, what are you going to do about it? Right. You hate to go to somebody and just complain. Well, what's the damn solution? It's like when I was in the military, I was a lieutenant colonel, and they would say the commander would say, I don't want you to come to me with a complaint unless you got 3 solutions, right? Give me some options, just sit there and bitch about it, put it on my shoulder and put it in my lap, So, I mean, this is something I've been working on for several years now, and I've partnered with a very capable partner that's a data scientist, engineer, entrepreneur out of the Silicon Valley area, quite honestly. But she used carnivore to put her autoimmune disease and basically cure that. And so she's been very excited. We've been working together for about almost 5 years now, 4.5 years. And so we launched we are about to launch a company called Rivero. It is basically all we're going to be doing is taking people with various common diseases, metabolic diseases, diabetes, obesity, hypertension, metabolic syndrome, autoimmune conditions like we talked about, psoriasis, rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's disease, whatever, inflammatory conditions. And, basically working with them on lifestyle nutrition and, with a doctor overseeing it, a team of health coaches, technology, we measure biomarkers, we look at those pretty regularly and try to literally reverse their disease if all possible, get them off the medications. I mean, trying to actually heal the condition rather than just, here's another pill, here's another Band-Aid. If that doesn't work, try this one or double the dose or whatever we normally do. And so that is, our mission is to hopefully we treat these people for, 6 months, a year, and then they're done and they never have to go to the doctor again or don't need it anymore. Because I think most of us, honestly, the fact that I can't remember what medicine is part of our GDP, but it's just like 20% of our GDP or something like that. Some ridiculously high amount. It should be like 2%, honestly. I think most people should not need the healthcare that we need. Most people, you figure how intrusive and how much of a part of most people's life healthcare becomes, particularly after a certain age. It's like you cannot function without the system, and you shouldn't need that, really. I think, in my view, I think most people, you break your arm, you have a baby, you get an infection, and outside of that, most of us should not need a physician. Now we do, most of us do, or at least we were told we do, because everybody's eating themselves to death. And I think it starts with nutrition. Obviously I'm a proponent of a carnivore diet, but that's not what everybody in Rivero is we're not going to put everybody on Rivero on a carnivore diet. Some people will get it. Some people will probably benefit from that, and we'll be able to, hopefully with more, and we'll collect a lot of data so we can further kind of tailor what we're doing. But it is, 100% about lifestyle, nutrition, exercise, sleep, all the things we're supposed to be doing. But in a very, one of the problems as a physician is, even if you knew this stuff and you wanted to practice it within the confines of a normal practice, you've got no support, you've got no time, you have no resource. I'm out there telling people to watch YouTube videos. That's not very good. That's not very effective. And so now we have a system where it's like, all right, here's 30 hours of video you can watch to learn about your condition and how to treat it. Here's people that can support you. They can help you with this. Here's a physician that's going to oversee this stuff. So it's a sort of an ambitious way to do what I think needs to be done. I mean, I think, like I said, I mean, I know there's some great physicians out there that get this stuff, but they feel like they're trapped in their practice. It's like, man, even if I want to do that, I don't have time. I've got the friggin' fighting with the insurance companies. I've got the friggin' administrators crawling up my back about billable out, all this crazy stuff that you got to do. And so we're hoping to, not only make a better experience for the patient, but also for the providers, because I mean, it's frustrating as a doctor, because you go into medicine and you're like, at least many people do. You go into, I want to help people, and you get there and you find out that you've got so many roadblocks to actually helping people. It's like you're fighting with insurance companies, you're fighting with your hospital administrators. You guys mentioned, the hospital system now, where it's a veneer of health. And I mean, you look at the physician growth over the last 30 years versus the administrator growth. The administrators are up like 1,000%, and physician growth is like 5%.
No, it's
like crazy.
It's completely
totally the truth.
It's completely, like, this is so far up our alley. I'm going to have trouble sitting down, because the issue is,
well, that's the reason I'm out of medicine, and semi-retired, is because just all the roadblocks you said, that ticking the boxes and all the junk you have to do, instead of actually being able to just even look at the patient instead of the computer screen, and interact with them and have the time to sit down and just get to the heart of the matter.
Yeah. Do you guys remember when they rolled out
yes.
EMR for the first time?
Yes.
I was like, what the hell is this bullshit? And then all of a sudden you're like glued. You're not even looking at your patient, you're just typing, and you feel like, I mean, it's crazy.
No,
paper charts and
right. But the solution is either absolutely 100% fixing the technology, which I don't know if that exists yet. So the EMR goes away and at least you have some connection to the patient, or what you're doing, which is what we think is probably the ultimate solution, is you have to create a whole bunch of other parallel systems that work better. Yeah. And then everyone can compete in that world. And then whichever works the best is going to float to the surface. And then that's what people are going to be drawn to. It's like, hey, do you want to, we're making a better argument. Do you want more pills and more doctor visits and more feeling crappy and less quality of life? Or do you want this? Because we now have 100,000 patients in our, national practice, and listen to them. They feel great. They're doing things they never thought they'd ever do again.
Like Doug Lucas. It reminds me of Doug Lucas. Have you heard of him? He's an orthopedist. Is it out of Oklahoma? Yeah, North Carolina.
North Carolina.
Who's a nutritionist.
Yeah, Doug. Yeah, I interviewed him a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, first time I'd met him. Yeah, nice guy. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's, you're right. It's there. I mean, we're a startup, obviously, and when we looked into this space, there are a number of companies trying to get into this game, because a lot of people are frustrated. A lot of physicians are frustrated. A lot of patients, particularly, are frustrated with, the 10-year battle with going from specialist to specialist and never getting any relief and feeling like they've been kicked around. And so, I mean, we're not going to be able to help every single human on the planet, and there's some conditions where it's like, you just can't fix them sometimes. But I mean, my gosh, let's try this sort of thing. And I think that, you're absolutely right. We will definitely, once we're rolling, we're going to contrast our results to the standard of care. Right. And I think we're going to come out very favorable. And we're going to be not quiet about it. I guarantee it, because I got a loud mouth. I'm going to be out there like, look, you can go to the regular doctor and get more pills, or you can come to us and, get rid of your damn disease, which I think that's what most people want in the first place. They don't go to the doctor because they want more pills. I mean, maybe indirectly because it takes away a little bit of their suffering. But, I think most people would trade that for like, I don't want this disease anymore. And I think, because you think about it, it's like, here's a neat argument. I mean, a crazy argument. They're justifying these obesity drugs, these GLP-1 receptor agonists, Well, the problem with these drugs is when people stop taking them, they regain all their weight. Well, it's like diabetes or hypertension. You don't expect to go to take these drugs just for a few years. You expect to take them for the rest of your life. That's what we've trained people to believe. So now they're trying to do the same thing with obesity. So now Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk and all these people that stand to make probably $1 trillion, quite honestly, by it's all said and done on these drugs, are just trying to train people to think, well, this is a lifelong, there's nothing I can do about disease. You've got what is it, Dr. Fatima Stanford over at Harvard, who's on the dietary guidelines committee, saying that
Oh yeah,
obesity is a
I know.
chronic genetic disease and nothing you can do about it. You can't diet, you can't exercise. It makes no difference. So, oh, by the way, I'm taking thousands of dollars from Novo Nordisk. So it's just kind of crazy the way we have.
But that is so on its
system.
face insane. Like when you see those pictures of Malibu Beach from like 1970 and no one's fat, or you see pictures of a movie theater from the mid 50s and no one's fat. And now you see a picture and it's like it's a manatee camp. Like it's just, and you sit there and you go, something changed. It wasn't like everyone just became wildly undisciplined and no, something changed. They were clearly poisoned. I mean, that's obvious. It's obvious.
Well, I mean, I don't know how old you guys are,
same
but
as you.
I'll be 57 in 2 weeks. So when I grew up in the 70s, I mean, there was the fat kid in my neighborhood, the fat kid, right? And his name was Stephen Smith. I remember him. He was the fat kid in my neighborhood. I included him in the neighborhood Olympics, but apologize. There's probably a lot of Stephen Smiths out there, but anyway, these kids today are growing up where all the kids are the fat kid. And so they don't even know any better. And, we can remember pictures from the 70s and living in the 70s, but in a generation or two, that's all going to be forgotten. No one's going to ever know what a society was like where, a significant minority or even perhaps a majority of people were not overweight or obese and chronically medicated and sick. That will be the norm that these kids are growing up into today. And that's that's perfect for pharma. It's like, okay, you expect it, here's your you leave the womb and immediately here's your pills, here's your happy pills, or here's your whatever, here's your obesity pill. I mean, it's going to be, unless something is done about it. And like I said, I mean, you can sit there and bitch and yell and complain about it like I've been doing for years, but you've got to give them a better option. And that's, like I said, that's what we're trying to do. And hopefully more people will join us.
So tell us, when do you anticipate Rivero opening to the public and how do they find out?
Yeah, we're shooting for basically after these holidays. January is when we have something like 6,000 people on our waiting list already. So we've got a pretty good group of people waiting to start. We are licensed in all 50 states. We're going to open, we're going to see 10 patients the first month. That's it. Just because we're like, we got to make sure everything works. We've spent, a year and a half building the platform, building out our own EMR and all the software and all the hookups and, making sure all the remote monitoring and everything works together and hiring the clinical clinicians and developing all the clinical protocols and all that stuff's been done. But, like I said, we're going to test it on 10 patients, to see that the glitches are fixed. Cause as inevitably there's going to be some software. Wait a minute, that didn't work like it's supposed to. And we got to correct that. And then I think by spring, we'll be opening it up to the broader population, probably 100, first 10, then 100, and then however many thousands we can get in there. And then we will probably have to hire more staff because we just have a skeleton crew around it because we don't have any patients yet. There's no point paying salaries when you can't, you don't have patients to see yet. But we got a lot of people that hopefully we will we'll be able to bring on there. But like I said, we're licensed in all 50, so that's good.
And people are going to ask, is this cash or do you build insurance or how does it?
So at this time, it is strict subscription model. There's no insurance involved, so you do have to pay cash. Eventually, there will probably go like the sequence of plan will be first direct to consumer like we're doing now. And then eventually we would like to, work with companies to sort of, offset some of their costs because a lot of the companies spend enormous amount of money on employee health. And if we can reduce those costs significantly, which I think we can, particularly for certain diseases, particularly, these companies paying for these people with their autoimmune biologic disease, it's just ridiculous. And then after that, we start looking at payers. So it may be insurance in 2 years or something like that. But for now, it's going to be strictly sort of a cash subscription model. But honestly, I think my goal, is not to, maybe in contrast to our best interest, but I would rather people use this for a year and then get the hell out and just not need doctors anymore, and then only use it for, emergencies, use healthcare for what it should be there for, is catastrophic care in my view. So,
yeah, well, anyway, healthcare should be for when you get in a car wreck.
Yeah.
or when you get pneumonia that used to
but I love
kill
it.
almost everyone.
You're educating them. You're helping cure and reverse their disease, giving them a set of tools and skill set so that you're right, they aren't dependent on that. They can change their life and they're set to go.
But companies would salivate over this. I mean, it's just, you take over their whole wellness program by plugging this in and making it work. That to me seems like a total no-brainer.
Yeah, that's where, and there's different, self-insured companies, and there's different insurance styles that companies have, and some of them take on more of their own risk, and those are the ones we'll target first. But yeah, that's the plan. And like I said, we'll just have to, like I said, I think we've built up the hype. We've got a lot of customers on the waiting list. We just have to execute, and that's the thing. It's like I said, we got to make sure it works. And so because I've talked to all the employees we have, and I've said, look, I don't care what your personal, why you're doing this, but we have to make a product that succeeds, and whatever it takes to make sure it succeeds, make sure you do that, whether it's building software or you're on the sales team or whatever. You got to think about what we want to do is truly and ultimately help people. And if you can do that, the product will sell itself.
Absolutely.
It's like when I got into this, when I got into this entrepreneurial stuff, which I never had any plan on doing, I'd never thought I was going to be doing write a book or be my own, company type of guy. I started reading all these entrepreneurial books, and there was one guy by the name of Guy Kawasaki who used to be what was called the CEO of Apple, which was Chief Evangelical Officer. He was like the guy, like the cheerleader guy. And, he's a quite accomplished entrepreneur. And the thing he said was, of all the things, and there's a lot of important things to being successful as business, but if you focus on your product to the point where it works incredibly well, that's it. You get something that works really, really well, and the people will, they will bend over backwards to get it. And I think that's
that's exactly right. The narrative draws them in, the product keeps them, and then they become then your customers are your best salesmen.
Right. You want them to be, you want the network effect, and you want them to be evangelistic.
Okay. So we're getting close to the end here. Where can everyone find you? If they don't follow you on Instagram, they are literally wasting their life. I'm convinced of that, because it's very informative and hilarious. So.
Yeah. So my Instagram is Shawn, SHAWN, Baker, BAKER. And then 1967. So Shawn Baker, 1967. That's the year I was born. I'm also on X, I guess formerly Twitter, at SBakerMD. So capital S, capital B, and then AKER, capital MD, SBakerMD. I've got a YouTube channel. It's Shawn Baker MD, and I've also got strangely enough, a TikTok account, also Shawn Baker MD.
I'm imagining
I want to go there and check
dancing.
I go there and dance. Yeah, I do dance. I do dances. I steak dances.
With gigantic tomahawks.
With your dog. Yeah, there you go.
I should do that. Yeah, my dog Maximus, my trusty dog. He's right here next to me. Yeah, he's just chilling out.
Your voice is soothing.
He knows he's not on the menu, so he's pleased with that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so he's not. There's not much meat on his bones, so I'd have to be pretty desperate. I'd eat some vegans before I eat him. So
good to hear.
Maybe get a little bit more meat from those guys.
Outstanding. Well, this has been just absolutely a joy. We're gonna hit the stop button. If you can hang around just for a sec to make sure that everything downloads, that would be amazing. And again, thank you so much for your time, for sharing with our audience. I know they're going to be amazingly blessed by this. One of my patients that I turned on to Carnivore, honestly, he literally stop our employees in the supermarket and say, "You got to try this. It's the greatest thing that's ever happened." It really is remarkable when people get, see their health change in such dramatic ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun as a provider to see that too, for sure.
All right, folks, that wraps up our chat with Dr. Baker. Huge thanks to him. Again, he's a busy guy, very accomplished, launching a startup, and just really challenges a lot of popular narratives, and honestly challenges a lot of narratives even in my own life. It's just like, can you go without eating sugar and carbs and, a bunch of junk, and just, it's so simple. All you do is eat meat.
I'm thinking if I can gain muscle mass like he has, then I'm all in for carnivore diet.
Yeah, well, you're not 6'8" and 270 or however big he is.
Goals.
But yes.
Anyway, If you're thinking of shaking up your diet, it's always a smart move to talk with your doctor first.
Unless your doctor is an idiot,
Yes.
like lots of doctors.
Check out, please, his book, The Carnivore Diet, and give us a podcast to listen to when you're not listening to ours. Anyway, we hope to bring you some more amazing interviews this new year. Until then, keep living your best, healthiest life. We hope to catch you next time on BS Free MD. This is Dr. May and Tim Hindmarsh. Over and out. We'll see you next time. It's no secret that medicine is a bit uptight. That's why Tim and I created BS Free MD, to mix things up a little and have fun in the process. Besides, we are having these exact same discussions all the time, so we thought we might as well invite everyone to the party. If you really like us, you can get plenty more and maybe see one of Tim's cool tattoos on our Instagram or Facebook pages at BS Free MD. See you next time.
Well, we try to keep BS Free MD as raw and real as possible. We can't be held responsible for any medical decisions or discussions had as a result of what you've heard on the show. We know, bummer. But the truth is, we really do care about your questions. So feel free to reach out to us by email at doc@bsfreemd.com.